Hey, Chris Manning here from the Locked On Cavs podcast, as always, with my co host, Evan Demerol. On today's show, we are going to talk about the latest in the NBA standings, where the Cavs are at right now, with some insight from what the Cavs said at practice on Tuesday about that. And we're going to look at the Cavs' point guard situation as they kind of evaluate what is going on there. Let's get to it on your daily look at the Cleveland Cavaliers.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Before we get into today's show, a couple housekeeping notes. First, we want to thank you for making it available on all platforms. That includes YouTube, Spotify, etc. Also, if you're just perhaps on YouTube, I'm Chris Manning. I cover the NBA for places like Dime, Fear the Sword, Cleveland Magazine. Co-host primarily covers the Cavs for Facebook's Right Down Euclid. Also contributes at places like Fear the Sword and Play Ohio from time to time. But Evan, let's talk about some standings. I want to start with a clip we got from Jared Allen and JB Bickerstaff too. A clip from Jared Allen first, and then a clip from JB Bickerstaff. This is from their media availability. In regards to the changing expectations on success for the team, in Allen's case, and in Bickerstaff's case, if this season is already a success, barring what happens or doesn't happen. So let's play the clip and we'll talk about it.
I would say, it's a tough question. For me to phrase it, I gotta phrase it right now. As the season goes along, expectations change, and we've been playing to such a high level that now the expectation has grown for how we have been playing. So now I think the direction, the goal is no longer only to make it inside the playoffs. It's now to go as deep as we can inside the playoffs.
To finish. If we don't finish, then no. The answer to your question. If we don't put together, a stretch of us playing our best basketball, then this year, in my mind, will not be a success. So we got to focus on that.
So there it is, Evan. What did you make of what those two gentlemen had to say?
It's a duality of things. I think Jared Allen is really real about it because he then followed up soon after and said, hey, this time last year, guys are getting ready just to think about what they're going to do that off season, what they're going to do, go on vacation and do. And like now they're kind of playing into the playoffs into consideration. And I think Jared Allen's just kind of said, we'll take the season wherever it takes us, and we'll take it where we can. He made it very clear that Cleveland is not a championship contender, but he does think they have the ability and they are equipped to make a deep playoff run, which I think is the right way to look at things. I think Bickerstaff kind of saying the season's a failure if they don't make the playoffs and make a run feels a little bit more like coach speak. Maybe he's trying to challenge his team a little bit because, let's be frank, I know if you ask people heading into the season within the organization, they're like, oh, hell yeah, we're a playoff team. Some, at least, who are public. Some privately probably thought maybe they weren't going to win their first 10 games or so. But it's interesting to see just kind of how things have changed. Like Jared Allen said, the narrative certainly has shifted quite a bit now that Cleveland just is in the catbird seat to make the playoffs. It's interesting to see where they end up. Again, I don't think it's a failure in itself. I know people dogged me a little bit during the Eastern Conference contender roundtable that I was just kind of happy to be there and be part of the conversation because it's surprising to think that Cleveland is really at this point. And I'm sitting and where Cleveland's currently standing. That's just my pun for the evening. But it's certainly fun to think where they're going and where they're headed. What did you make of it, though?
Well, I think for me, the thing I take away from it is, number one, outline what I think is the Cavs' reality, right? And that is that they are in a place that I don't think they necessarily expected to be in. They are more advanced than I think they expected to be in. Like, they're just in a different reality than I think they sort of thought they would be. And I think that people expected them to maybe be another lottery team. I think, we picked the under for 26.5. Like, they've exceeded expectations in a very drastic way. And I think they're also in this weird position now where I think some people are looking at them and saying, okay, they're regressing to what they actually are. I think the truth is somewhere like they're not like actually a 50-win team, but they're not nearly as bad as sort of we expect them to be. And I think competing for a playoff, I think you nailed the JB thing. I think the JB thing is very clearly like pushing. That has been kind of an undertone of I think a lot of what he has said publicly, um, in terms of them continuing to go, and not just like take what has happened already as what all that matters, right? There's still a lot to play for, and I think ultimately like this is a situation where the Cavs are playing basketball into March that absolutely matters, right? This, if you look at what's happening here on Wednesday night, that Hornets game matters. And like, who would have thought, Evan, that Cavs Hornets March 2nd would have had like implications for the Cavs, that it would have had stakes, it would have had drama. Like that's where we're at in this. That I think is reflected in sort of both of what they're saying is that right now this all really, really matters.
It's a shame that this game isn't on Thursday night and not on TNT. I believe Sunday's game against Toronto is Cleveland's first national TV game, but TNT, they know drama. But yeah, you're right. The Cavs are playing meaningful basketball in March, early March, probably into April as well. It's going to be interesting to see where they end up. I think Alan kind of saying that the Cavs are aware of where they stand on a night-to-night basis, knowing that a loss could tumble them all the way down to 6, or a win could kind of keep them in the race between like 2, 3, and 4. It's going to be tight. He said that the team's aware of this, but they're not trying to let that get to them. I think that's the right mentality to have as well, where they can't like let this onus and pressure just based on what they built this season so far kind of weigh down the overall success of this season, because it's tough, because now the expectation is, okay, how are you going to perform on a night-to-night basis? Because Cleveland is no longer surprising people. I think that a lot of the league knows that this is a good team. They're a well-coached team. They are playing true to themselves. They're playing their style of basketball and imposing their will on people. I think that is endearing in itself as a fan to watch this team. But it's refreshing to hear that one of the leaders, and I guess one of the veterans, because Allen is one of the quasi-veterans in the locker room, just kind of say, like, listen, we know what's going to...
And a guy that like came up kind of in a way not the same as this, but he did himself earlier this year compare the vibes of this Cavs team to those Nets teams. That he said that at media day, and then obviously like Karis LeVert here now, kind of funnily and ironically and whatever, but like they it is a team that is not like laden with superstars, but is competing and competing on a night-to-night basis with some of the best teams in the league. Like that to him, I bet you there is some deja vu, even if obviously there's some very different things going on here. Like I think the guard situation, for instance, with Darius is like very different than D'Angelo and Spencer Dinwiddie.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I think there are some interesting parallels to the Brooklyn situation, but it's just a fun team. It's a fun, successful season. It's interesting to see where they kind of end up playoff-wise, who they end up drawing the first round, how deep they go. There's a lot of interesting variables and interesting factors, but like I said, I think him just maintaining perspective and saying that, hey, we didn't really expect to be at this point. No one expected us to be at this point, but here we are. Don't let that weigh down on you, and you continue to have fun and continue to go back to playing your style of basketball. Because maybe that's why, other than the guard play, it feels a little tight for the Cavs right now, because they're putting a little pressure on themselves in itself. But
Yeah,
interesting to see how it goes.
Yeah, there's weight to these games. The Hornets game is a good in that. And look, Kings are, as of right now, if you're on YouTube, we're gonna throw this up on the screen. But the Cavs right now, this is as of Tuesday at about 7:30 p.m. So we haven't seen games conclude. There aren't a ton of games on Tuesday. Atlanta, Boston probably being the most known, with Brooklyn and Toronto also playing. So two very important Eastern Conference games right around when we're going here on this Tuesday night slate. Brooklyn and Atlanta winning would probably be useful to the Cavs to some degree in terms of creating some separation. They are a game up on the Celtics right now, and 2.5 up on Toronto, the top seed in the play-in tournament right now. So that is where, look, I think to just emphasize this, I would just say I think it is also correct that expectations have changed. I think moving the goalpost, because the team has proven to be some quality, it's a natural byproduct of this, and like there comes weight with that. There becomes just some stress to that, and I think that's a positive. But Evan, after the break, we are going to go into our second segment. We are going to talk about point guard play, and I have some numbers for you in regards to Darius Garland, who may be back. He's listed as questionable in the latest injury report for Wednesday's game, if he plays or not. But we're going to tell everyone about our friends at PrizePicks.
You're absolutely correct. All right, NBA fans, are you looking for a daily fantasy option for worthy NBA? You need to try out the award-winning app PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. I love it, and we know you will too. Just pick 2 to 5 players and an over/under on their projections, and you win up to 10 times on any entry. It's just you versus the projected numbers. Entries can be made in just 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. PrizePicks is safe and offers fast withdrawals. Use the award-winning app on both the App Store and the Google Play Store. PrizePicks offers a variety of options, and they offer you any prop that you can think of, from points scored to rebounds, even steals. PrizePicks also allows mixed sports entries, and PrizePicks just doesn't offer the NBA. They have options on college basketball, college football, NFL, MLB, soccer, MMA, and even more. For a limited time, PrizePicks has an exclusive no-brainer of an offer for all of our users. Users get $50 for free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores a single point, but you must use code NBA, like the league. That's right, this is an exclusive offer available to Locked On Cavs fans. Sign up today and use promo code NBA for $50 for free if a player in your PrizePicks entry scores a single point.
All right. Back here, Chris Manning, Evan Damerald, the Locked On Cavs podcast, your daily look at the Cleveland Cavaliers. Evan, I'm going to throw some numbers at you in regards to Darius Garland. Are you ready?
Absolutely, my friend.
So the context here is we're going to talk about point guard play for the Cavs. Guard play has obviously been a big issue for them of late, and Garland not playing is sort of why this is an issue. So, Evan, this year, in a little over 3,200 possessions thereabouts, Cavs points better per 100 possessions with Garland on the floor. The offensive rating in those minutes of 113.3, a defensive rating of 104.6. Garland, Okoro, Markkanen, Mobley, Allen as a 5, aka kind of what we think may be the starting lineup going forward, depending on what happens with Caris LeVert, is plus 12.3 possessions in just a tad under 400 possessions of game time. They have an offensive rating of 114.6, a defensive rating of 102.3. Those are very, very good numbers offensively in particular. That is significantly higher than Cavs, which is like 107-ish or so, depending on it fluctuates. Garland off the court. Cavs are minus 2.9 points per 100 possessions, giving up scoring 107.3 per 100 possessions. That is, as you can see, a pretty seismic drop. Defensive rating of 110.2. There are some successful lineups in those non-Garland lineups, right? But they are overall small sample sizes. There's not a ton to extract. Some of them had Ricky Rubio in them, etc., which we've talked about a lot. I think based on the numbers that we can see, the Cavs are a lesser team without Darius Garland. So, Evan, when I throw this at you, A, what does this data say to you? Does it lead you in any directions? Does it spark anything? Does it spark any joy? And does it match what you have thought, I guess, about what Darius has meant to this team so far?
No, it just kind of reiterates my stance and this podcast stance, if you're a regular listener, that Darius Garland is the team's most important player. You can go back and forth on him whether or not he's the best player. I think he has a case. Maybe it's Evan Mobley long term. It's Jared Allen's most consistent option on a night-to-night basis. But Garland is the straw that stirs the drink for the Cavs. He's the engine that makes things go. Like, you could say any sports cliche or whatever you want about him. He is just so important to what the Cavs do and just overall success offensively on what they do and defensively as well. I think missing him is certainly something you have noticed when they played Minnesota. Like, there was moments when the offense completely stalled out, and just you could see that the Cavs just kind of needed that 3-point gravity. They needed a little bit of that juice, that's that punch of the arm that Garland provides. It's tough to really put into perspective how valuable he is, but as you watch these games against Detroit, or how ugly it got against Washington, or how it turned into a track race against Minnesota, and the Cavs just didn't have just enough to get them over the edge, it really puts into perspective how important he is. And if he plays Wednesday against Charlotte, that's great. Knock on wood, hope his back is okay, so he's available long term, because that's the thing the Cavs stress the most with this back injury of his, is he's available long term for this Cavs team. It's just not like, oh, he can play against Charlotte, then he's going to miss another handful of games, and then you have to just kind of do this ugly back and forth for a while. So it just puts in perspective how important he is to this team. Like, he's truly valuable. And we talked about Brandon Goodwin a little bit on Tuesday's episode, and he's played well, but there's a clear separation, obviously, between what Brandon Goodwin provides and what Darius Garland provides.
in context with this and what we're seeing with the Cavs. I think we talked about this on that Wolves recap. The Cavs are in a stretch right now. We're are not playing. Darius Garland is like clearly the most important guy on this team. The load he is carrying on the offensive end is crazy, and like he doesn't deserve like credit for, I think, the defensive impact, right? Like I think obviously that is Allen, Mobley. A lot of the non-Garland lineups are like one of those guys, and like those lineups are obviously going to be a little bit lesser defensively because the identity of this team is built on those two bigs, and then Okoro was kind of the third point of attack part of that equation. Garland's offensive load is just so outrageous that like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this is like fair, but I think what we I think we've almost understood this because I think he's gotten all the flowers he deserves for being really good. I think if you look at like on-off impact, if you look at just the overall function of the offense, like since Rubio went down and since he's been out, and just like how those two things impacted differently. I kind of think Garland, like, we almost didn't understand how important the Rubio part of it. And the Rubio thing was very fun. I'm not trying to deny that was like a really
Yeah.
Garland was just, I think, like, if Rubio was like here in importance, and then they tried to replace it with like a version of Rondo that hasn't worked for various reasons. And we'll talk about LeVert in the next segment and kind of what he could provide to this equation. Garland's impact was like here in terms of its importance. It is so high up that if you're watching, the ceiling is the roof, Evan. The ceiling is the roof, to quote Michael Jordan, right? Like, that is the reality of what we're seeing with him. And it's just like, I just, like, I'm like thinking about these last couple games that he hasn't played, and really anytime we haven't seen him this year, and like thinking that it represents like what this team actually is. It tells you a weakness that they have to address going forward. But like it doesn't tell you, I should say, to clarify, about what the best version of this team is. He is instrumental to, like, there are three heads to this monster. It is Garland, it is Mobley, and it is Allen. And like without him, it's just like this team. It has just become so clear again. I think that this team doesn't function in the way that it kind of needs to when he's not available.
No, you're absolutely correct. It's just a point we've been reiterating all season long. Whenever Garland has missed time due to his back or COVID or anything, like there's a clear and distinct drop off, and like the Cavs are able to cobble a little bit of something together with Ricky Rubio because Rubio just kind of had that spark. He was just feeling himself for the better part of the season with the Cavs. I think having JB Bickerstaff empower him so much really helps a lot for Rubio's game too. But like you said, the Cavs tried to cobble something together. The Rajon Rondo is a temporary replacement. I think they found something in Brandon Goodwin with Rondo and Garland now, but it's not a permanent option either. It's really puts into perspective how valuable he is. And I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but off-season priorities is like signing Darius to a max or as close to whatever the max is for him in the Cavs, and then maybe trying to sign Sexton to an extension. But like it has to be up there to find him like a truly reliable backup option, because yes, you don't foresee Rubio blowing out his knee like he did, but you need a competent backup behind him. So you're not playing him 30, 40 minutes a night so that you don't have to deal with these injury issues when he hopefully doesn't burn out a second time around.
I think that's a good question. I want to pick that up after the break because I think Caris LeVert factors into that, right? Like I think Caris work hand in hand in that. So let's pick that up after this word from our friends at Built Bar. Look, Evan, this is the time of year when people give up on their New Year's resolutions. I certainly, struggle with this, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right, and that's thanks to Built Bar. Built Bars are covered in 100% chocolate. That includes their great puffs. They're 100% real chocolate. Low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bars with these. These are better. A typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. And there's great flavors. Mint brownie, coconut almond, and white chocolate cookies and cream is new for this month. Go and use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Again, the promo code is LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com, and you can stock up on all of their amazing flavors. All right, last segment, Chris Manning, Evan Damrell here. We are Locked on Cavs, your Cleveland Cavaliers podcast. Evan, I think what you said at the end of the break in discussing the need to find a backup for Darius Garland. I think this leads into two questions I've kind of been thinking about in terms of Karis LeVert. Number one, I think what does Karis LeVert healthy? Because he's only played 3 games, we don't have the answer to that yet. And two, how does he lessen the burden on Garland right now to carry the load that he is? And then I think it leads you to follow questions. What are the answers to these questions? Positive, does that change what they could do in the playoffs? Does it give them a chance to noise in the playoffs? And I think this year, when I think you hit on, is this a thing where he and Sexton, depending on what his price will be, combined to be your backup point guards, and you just like Brandon Goodwin becomes like your sort of like break glass case for emergency? Do they go try to find a more traditional backup point guard and try to play all of these guys and just overload shot making in a way and creation in a way they necessarily did not have this year, and sort of change the DNA of the offense to some degree? There's a lot of implications of this Karis LeVert thing, and we have not obviously again seen it yet due to his unfortunate foot sprain. The Colin Sec, I think the biggest the biggest lingering question we will have coming out of the season, frankly, is what would Colin Sexton's role have looked, just based on due to him missing this whole season and like really missing the ascent and what he would have looked like post Rubio and all of that stuff. That's such a what if that we're never going to know the real answer to in the context of this specific season. I think just figuring out how they approach this will matter with LeVert now, but I wonder how much of this LeVert stuff, once he's back, assuming good health and all of that, decision that you're talking about as we look ahead to the summer and building out this roster, not just to be good this year, but next year and the year after and so on.
If Darius Garland was Frodo Baggins and Karis LeVert, Colin Sexton were the Samwise Gamgee, I'd add a third one to be that Samwise to help share the load with Mr. Frodo in terms of getting the quest for the Ring of Power. If you know, you know. It's a very old Lord of the Rings meme. But
well, I was gonna say, like, if this was like Game of Thrones and Darius is the Jon Snow, who is Tormund, who is Sam, and who is Ghost?
Well, Sam's a little creepy. It's like Sam's a good friend, but he's also a little creepy and kind of gross.
Okay. We're no more analogies. Let's move on.
Yeah, so I'm gonna keep with my Lord of the Rings one. If you want them to share the load on the quest for the ring, you make a compelling argument. I think JB playing Karis LeVert a little bit as the one, it worked a little bit. I just think it's so disheartening that a guy with a history of foot injuries has another foot injury where he is just sidelined for 2 weeks approximately. And he's out Wednesday against Charlotte. Who knows if he's available Friday against Philadelphia or Sunday against Toronto? We shall see. But either way, this is valuable minutes for Karis LeVert. And I think a player the Cavs could really use right now. And like the only blessing in disguise of Darius Garland being out is if Karis LeVert's available, this is a prime opportunity for him to get acclimated with the majority of this team. So you can kind of unlock his offensive repertoire and his rapport with a lot of his teammates, because JP Bickerstaff made it clear that they're just primarily running a pick and roll heavy offense when it comes to LeVert being on the floor, and he isn't really playing the full potential of Cleveland's offense. And that's frustrating, but I can see long-term, not long-term, but at least for next season, that being an option. And I don't hate the idea necessarily that maybe you try to go with a dominant ball handler scheme where you have a bunch of shot creators, whether it's Garland or new backup or Sexton or LeVert. And I know a lot of people float Ricky Rubio, but Ricky Rubio realistically could not be playing till this time next year as well. Who knows? Because ACL injuries are tricky. But I also don't hate the approach of Garland being backed up by LeVert and Sexton as like the backup point guards. Not saying Sexton's coming off the bench, not opening that can of worms today, but it could be an option as well. And I don't hate that.
Some of this could be price, right? Like some of this could be, I mean, I think this impacts the Isaac Okoro future as well, just to kind of wrap all of the guards into this conversation, just because like there's only so much money, and even if a cap boom is coming, even if there is money to become down the line, like there's probably like remember when LeVert was acquired, there was floating that he was going to get an extension right away, right? Like he was floated as maybe getting summer when he becomes eligible. Colin Sexton obviously has to sign a deal or sign the qual summer. Like there were kind of the chips are on the table in regards to what happens with him. And I think if I were to be a betting man today, if BetOnline, our official betting partner, had odds on it today, I would bet Darius Garland's getting a max this summer. Or if he's not getting a max, like,
Yeah.
and to like, this is word it is the kind of deal where it's like it becomes max with like some incentives or something like that. Like, it is going to be lots of money for Darius Garland based on the season he's had, and like that, there's probably limits on how much Kobe Altman and Mike gain that one position group, right? And like, Karis LeVert is locked into his number next year. You know, like there are things to consider in terms of how you want to spread this around. And I would, um, I think sort of one out of this year just because of the injury stuff, just because of some of the way things have just kind of played out. I think my gut tells me that, and the coaching staff sort of vision this year was, hey, we're gonna go get Ricky Rubio. He's gonna fix stuff for us. Like, do they go back to a version of that, or like, do they say, okay, like I think like how they decide to approach this will be really interesting. And like, look, for the rest of the year, I think how JB handles his rotation with LeVert will be interesting. Like, I mean, you could play LeVert. Like, is he going to play LeVert Rondo? Is he going to play LeVert and Goodwin? Is he going to just play like LeVert and go more wings? Like, does Jetty continue to, does he ride the Jetty hot hand and let Jetty handle the ball a little bit more? Like, I am fascinated by kind of how this will be approached the rest of the year, because that will be like the biggest data point that we can take into the summer and say, okay, maybe a path the Cavs could take to kind of figure out this guard situation. Because I suspect that like they look at this year and say, like, I obviously injury bad, like all that stuff, but like we hope to God we don't get in where like things just don't work because we don't have creators on our team.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought process, an interesting thought exercise. The issue is I don't know if you can really go tangibly grab a player that's on par with Ricky Rubio, just considering, like you said, cat figures. Yes, there's going to be a spike down the line, but if they keep Colin Sexton, they have to pay Colin Sexton. What?
It's not a spike for next year.
No, it's not. It's
It is
down
not.
the line.
Yeah.
So, like, if you pay Colin Sexton, that murkies things a lot. If you keep Karis LeVert and possibly sign him to an extension, that murkies things a lot. Isaac Okoro's money is going to come into question, like you said. Darius Garland, if he signs an extension, won't be impacted next year, but it will kick in the following year. Jared Allen's still being paid. There's a lot of players on Cleveland's roster that are currently making. Kevin Love's making more money than I'll ever see in my life as well in just one season. So, it's a lot of dynamics, a lot of interesting things. I don't know if there's a tangible player you can just go out there and necessarily grab unless you crack one of these eggs to make an omelet in this case. So it's like you sacrifice LeVert or you trade Sexton, or if you find like a tangible upgrade that's available, you explore that. But I'm warming up to the idea the more we talk about it of having Garland start and then you supplant some of the playmaking duties, whether it's from Okoro or Sexton or LeVert or Osmond. You try this playmaking by committee approach, but you keep Brandon Goodwin in the wings. Maybe you keep Rajon Rondo on a cheaper deal if you really like him here, and he has a positive impact that as well. Like, there are options available for the Cavs, but maybe like you just don't make those guys centerpieces in your rotation next year, like the fringe guys, and like the Goodwins and the Rondos.
And then the sort of icing on that cake is Darius Garland being healthy and not having a bruise in his back.
Yeah, that's the tough thing, and that's the frustrating thing is I don't necessarily think it's a doomsday scenario like Mike Gansey joked about, but this is like suboptimal timing on top of suboptimal timing on top of suboptimal timing in terms of Garland, then LeVert, then Rubio, or sorry, not Rubio, Rondo falling down all at the same time and being out.
Yeah, I think that's right. Okay, that's going to be it for this episode of Locked On Cavs. As we're recording this, we do not have a betting line yet for Cavs Hornets, so check out BetOnline if you want to get in on that. No other news as of now. The Cavs, as far as we know, as of right now, have not signed anyone, and I don't going to sign anyone new to that open roster spot on the buyout market to the March 1st. It's like 3 a.m., so like we're not gonna be awake, and like I don't know if like Kobe Altman's like staying up till 3 a.m. to like sign a buyout guy to a minimum contract or something, but it seems like maybe they'll go like internal if they're going to fill a roster spot for a playoff eligible thing. But we'll see. We'll talk about that perhaps on Thursday's show after we see what happens in that Hornets game. We'll be back in our next episode breaking down that Hornets game in detail. Our big takeaways, our game awards, and emptying our notebooks from that one. Should be a fun one at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse. Evan, any final thoughts before I hit the eject button here?
No, not really. If you listen to this point, appreciate it as always. I am doing a ticket to giveaway like I used to with the Cleveland Charge. It's a bit of a quick turnaround. It's for Friday's game. I'll be posting a tweet Wednesday morning, so when this episode goes live, you'll likely see it as well. And just retweet, all that good stuff. Follow me, follow the Charge, and enter to win some tickets to see them play on Friday night.
Yeah. If you want to get your second listen today, go check out Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. That's Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. Remember, that is free and available on all platforms, just like Locked On Cavs. I'm Chris. That's Evan. Everyone, be well, be safe. Enjoy Cavs Hornets. We'll talk to you after that.